Okay, hope everyone's having a good time. Even the people who didn't win the volleyball tournament, I hope are having a good time. Ariel's having a good time. All right. Peanut butter and a good speech. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about relationships. Phase one of a talk about relationships. So relationships are an important subject. People usually like to talk about it. They like to hear about it because it's a fundamental thing in life. We're here to be part of a group. We're here to be connected. We're here to be in relationship. Man was not created to be alone, to be an island. And specifically, of course, the relationship we're going to focus on more than others is the marital relationship, a relationship between men and women. As a marital relationship, some ideas that we can talk about what that's built on. How are we supposed to view that? And I want to share with you a statement which sounds out there. It sounds like really, really, really over the top spiritual. And, it's a statement which people, certainly in religious life, we use it a lot. We say that we make this statement a lot. But we're going to try to talk about what it really means and make it from something which is up there in the clouds to make it into something that's real. Something real that we could latch onto as we think about and talk about building relationship. So this is the statement which will be the starting point for this discussion. The Talmud says that if a man and woman are fortunate, if they merit, if they're deserving, the Hebrew word for it is zachu, whatever that, you could translate it in any of the above ways. If a man and woman get it right, Shechina shruya beineim, the presence of God is found between them. But if not, it's a disaster. Eish ochlasan, a fire can consume them. Pretty dramatic. Okay, just think about the positive one. Man and woman merit, the presence of Hashem, the presence of God is there between them. Like, what does that mean exactly? If you'll ask the students here, the tutors here, they'll say, okay, so like once in a while, one of our friends get married, we go to the wedding, we go to a sheva brachos, we go to a celebration of the wedding afterwards. Somebody gets up and gives a speech. 8 times out of 10, someone's going to say something about the presence of Hashem being there in the house, right? Do the tutors agree? Huh? You never heard that? Okay, you don't go to enough parties. What? Okay. Yeah. So what does it mean? What does it mean? How do we manage to understand that idea? So the Talmud says an interesting thing, which it comes from, which is that the word for man in Hebrew is ish, male. The word for woman is isha. Sounds similar. Ish, isha, just like in English, man, woman, right? Ish, isha. Except, let's notice, the core of both words is the aleph shin sound, ish, which also spells eish. But each one has one letter that the other one doesn't have. The male has the letter yud in it, and the woman's name, Isha, has the letter He in it. To put together those 2 letters, that's a spelling of the name of God. So when the man and woman come together, well, you have the name of God. When they're left to their own, all you have is the common quality is Eish. They'll consume each other. It burns. Okay, so you're more familiar with Hebrew, less familiar with Hebrew, how much that means to you or doesn't mean to you. It's not so relevant, the specific. But what's this idea that a relationship between a man and woman can bring God into the equation, can bring God between them? A successful relationship has God in there. So I want to try to set here a frame of reference for relationship, especially for the male-female relationship. What's the frame of reference within which we're supposed to view this thing, this notion of the male-female relationship? And we'll start by posing, I want to pose to you sort of like a riddle, a question. It's a question in nature. It's a question in nature. And the question is like this. Men and women come together, they have a relationship. The male-female relationship is the relationship which is capable of producing children, capable of producing a family. That's the relationship that's capable of producing a family. What would you call the act of producing a family? Where would you put that on the scale of selfish or generous, giving, selfless? Where would you put the act of having children, of having a family? Now, yes, it's true that one could say that there are selfish aspects to having children. People have children, they could be like, a trophy, this is my kid, I'm so proud, and so on and so forth. But the trophy moments are vastly outnumbered by the responsibilities of having children. This is not a complaint. It's just a fact. They're vastly outnumbered by the responsibilities of having children. In fact, I'll tell you a fascinating thing that it says in the Talmud. There's a verse which says, it's a verse in Psalms which says, fortunate is the one who observes justice and does tzedakah. Tzedakah means charity. He does charity b'chol eis, constantly. Fortunate is the person who practices justice and does charity constantly. So the Talmud says, I don't get it. I know there are philanthropists. There are people who, they'll give a lot of money. They'll help people out. People will knock on the door, they'll come to them in their business, and they will help them. But which philanthropist in the world does charity all the time? Who could be a full-time philanthropist? Who on earth could be that? Right? I happen to have a cousin, right, who's he's part of a very, very philanthropic family. And he's like unbelievable. To me, he's like a role model, an example. So what does he do? So he makes sure every morning, virtually every morning, when he's in his city, every morning he prays the morning service in the same synagogue. There are 15 synagogues within 3 square blocks of his house. He always prays in the same synagogue at the same time. For what reason? Because he wants to make sure anybody who needs his help knows where he is. And what happens is when he finishes the prayers in the morning, he's not going anyplace. He sits there, and person after person comes and talks to him, people who need help in one thing or another. Unbelievable. So let's say he prays at 7:30 and he finishes at 8:20, and then he sits with people till 9 o'clock, till 9:15. At a certain point in time, the line finishes, or he's got to get on to do the next thing. So he goes on to something else. He does a lot of charity. He has dedicated time in his life, virtually every single day, to do charitable acts. To me, that's like an unbelievable thing. But he doesn't do it all the time. Who can be characterized as someone who does charity all the time? And you know what the Talmud's answer to that question is? A parent. Ze hazon esbonav vesbenosav kshenktanim. A person has young kids. They feed them. They take care of them. They're constantly doing charity. What do you mean they're doing charity? If they don't feed their children, they're going to get arrested. They chose to have children choosing to have children is a choice to make a feature of your life giving. I remember I had a friend, goes back a few decades, I had a friend who had his first child. And he went to a mentor of his, and he said, "Congratulations, my wife just had a baby. Wow, fantastic, mazel tov, terrific. How's she doing? How's she feeling? Yeah, terrific, fantastic. When's she coming home? She's coming home the day after tomorrow." He says, "I'm going to sleep in the hospital tonight. I want to sleep in the hospital tonight. She's going to be in the hospital tonight with the baby. I'm sleeping in the hospital tonight to take care of her." So the mentor says, "Do me a favor." He says, "Sleep at home. It's the last full night of sleep you're going to get for 35 years. When you sign up for this thing, I will tell you, it's the most rewarding thing in the world. Most rewarding thing in the world. Most rewarding thing in the world. But you're signing up to a world of responsibility, of giving, of caring for someone, whether you have one child, whether you have 11 children. You're taking care of them. It's your sleep. It's your, you have a child, you don't just say, "Oh, hey, let's go out for dinner." 1 second. If we're going to go out for dinner, we have to figure out who's going to take care of the baby. We have to time it right? So we'll get someone to come right after we put the baby to sleep. Is the baby still waking up? And so on and so forth. Where are we going to go? Everything in life becomes built around that. Am I scaring you? I hope not. Again, it's like the most rewarding thing in the world. But that's having children. If I would ask you, okay, so you just described something. Now, I haven't learned anything. I don't know the facts of life. You'll tell me. I have a feeling you do. But I don't know the facts of life. So, what kind of an act would a person do in order to get into that ballpark? To do something, to just be producing a life of absolute giving. Like almost selfless. And someone will tell you, that the way you get into that ballpark is by an act that some people call lust, desire, great pleasure seeking. You think about it, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like the same thing which is used to produce children is a thing which can sometimes be the ultimate act of self-absorption. Why is it? How's that happen? Why did God make things this way? What do you think about the question?
Otherwise, no one would want to have kids.
I'm sorry?
Otherwise, nobody would want to have kids.
Otherwise, nobody would want to have kids.
But what are you asking? Why there's two ends of the stick with regard to this one act?
That's right. That's it. It's a paradox.
It is a big paradox. I feel like it's in one way it's a constant way to tempt males, and through that temptation, you overcome that temptation, and as you do that, you become a more holy individual. But I don't know. That's not a good answer.
So it's all a test. Somebody said, otherwise nobody would have children. Otherwise nobody would have children. So it's possible. There is a statement somewhere in the Medrash, which says that if not for the world of desire, maybe people wouldn't get married, people wouldn't build buildings, people wouldn't do these kinds of things. But you can face it. You could have one without the other. It's not doesn't require rocket science.
It depends what perspective you look at it.
Yeah.
Like when you give charity to a person who accepts charity, it feels good for you to give the charity, but it also feels good for him to accept the charity.
It feels good. He feels good accepting the charity, or you feel good that he accepts the charity?
He feels good that he got charity,
Yeah.
so now he can buy a sandwich.
Or foot cream.
It was over Shabbat, so. I guess I'm saying that if you look at it like it feels good for you, this is true. But if you look at it from her perspective, it's like she's able to help you feel good, and vice versa. So why would I give you charity if you're not going to feel good from it?
Okay. I hear where you're going. Yes, are you?
I kind of look at it as like a drug, like let's say a painkiller. Its mere purpose is to relieve pain, but yet people take it constantly just because it makes you feel good. But instead of taking it for the pain, they just take it for fun.
So a person can engage in it in a way which doesn't end up making them feel good at all.
Well, take it for when you have pain rather than
Right.
when you.
Can you, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut me. Go ahead. Oh, wait, you know what, let me just. No, because I had the thought.
Go ahead.
Can you make the kind of conclusion that since man is able to produce like a great mitzvah known as children, right, and thus have this thing produce great tzedakah, great charity, if we go down the logical route, right, that's one end of the spectrum, and you're creating a big blessing, like a great, beautiful thing, would then, I'm thinking like a rabbi, I guess. Would you then, would it be safe to assume that the other end of the spectrum, when you don't use it toward the end of children, that it's the total opposite of a blessing, and it's like evil, if you will, like you're producing evil by having like non-marital sex or just baseless sex, right? Is that like, I feel like that's where you're going, or not that where you're going, but that's like the way I see it, right? I mean, that's the way I'm starting to see it. It's like you could produce this great miracle, right? You could use this tool to do that, but the other end of the spectrum is you could use the tool, but use the tool towards evil or towards the total opposite of what is known as charity, as a blessing, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that to some degree that might be like the implication of the question or the direction of it. I just want to like separate what I'm saying, which is, and just like sort of like the reality of it. The reality of it, whether I said anything or not. We know that this part of life is there to create that beautiful, wholesome, together unit called the family. And at the same time, that same drive can be a very, very destructive, family-busting force. Right?
Yeah.
So figuring out how to get a hold of this thing and what the perspective we're supposed to have for it is critical, between it being something which can make you a horrible, destructive person who's obsessed with this for one purpose, or something else. And let me just say one thing before we got two comments here, one in front of the other. Remember, by the way, is the implication here going to be that therefore this act only makes sense to have children? Which would mean that it would not make sense, let's take a simple example. Okay, so of course it wouldn't make sense if it was not in a marriage or something like that. But also wouldn't make sense in a marriage if a woman is pregnant. Wouldn't make sense. If a couple is older, it wouldn't make sense. Does it not make sense? So you didn't hear that here. If you leave early, you didn't hear that here. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. So we need to still refine this better. Yes?
I just wanted to clarify whether the question was, how can it be that this act has these different implications, or is the question, what makes it so that the outcome is either on one side of the spectrum or the other?
I think you could ask it both ways.
All right.
You can ask, why did God make it this way? Why is the world made this way, that we have this?
Oh, okay.
It's a phenomenon that you have to think about. That you have to think about.
Can I offer?
Please.
Which is this, creation and destruction are just a foil pair that, you can't have one without the other in some regard. And as for
Zeh le'umat zeh, we say in Hebrew. It's like two sides of a coin.
yes, and where you end up on that spectrum is a matter of intent, just like any other action, or just like with anything in life, it could be used for positive or it could be used for evil.
Okay, good. Nathan and then Jeff.
I just wanted to say, someone mentioned earlier, there would be, otherwise nobody would have kids, but there's still a halachic obligation to get married, have kids, so either way, if you're someone who's observant or someone who cares about the halacha, either way.
You would try to figure out a way to be fruitful and multiply one way or the other. Yeah. Okay, true. You want to say something?
So just to build off what Mike was saying, I completely, why is lust a bad thing? It's about how you direct it, right? There's a mitzvah that if you're, not just men have lust over women, and there's a mitzvah to actually make sure your wife is satisfied, right? So it doesn't matter if she's pregnant or not, she needs to be satisfied. I don't get why is this a bad thing in a marriage?
No, we're not saying that it is a bad thing. What we're saying is that sometimes lust can be a real derailer of people in their lives, where they're just overtaken by the satisfaction of lust, and it can't be something. Yes, that's exactly the point, which is we're trying to say within the relationship, it's a very, very positive thing, it seems. Very, very positive thing. To the extreme of, the example of the ultimate giving, but we want to figure out how to understand it, how to grasp it, how to make sure that it is a magnificent thing instead of, heaven forbid, something which is leading a person all the way in the wrong. Ethan.
You hear the phrase, let's start a family, between a man and a woman, if they're recently married or if they want to have kids. But I think maybe that's kind of the root of the issue, is maybe misunderstanding what a family is. Does a family start with a couple who's married, or does it start when you have a kid?
Okay, good question. Good question. Did the family start already before the child is born? So that sort of maybe we'll use that here as a segue to try to look at this a little bit. And I'm going to let's hearken back to something that many of us have talked about together already a couple of times. And we said we would keep coming back to it because it's just a fundamental piece of our view of things. And for a moment to talk about this idea of the presence of God in there. The presence of God. Being in any way a human being in the image of God. What's this God thing that we're supposed to tap into? So we have discussed already a couple of times in our time together here that there's something about God, that God is this great, complete being who needs nothing, who's completely independent. Any creature in the world doesn't provide God with anything that he needs. But yet God created the world. He created all these creatures that need him completely, which make it that God is all giver. He's all about giving. He's not about taking. And a human being who wants to be able to somehow actualize that idea of the human being somehow being a replica in the image of God, having God in their life, having God in their home, would also be much more other-directed than self-directed. Could a human being be completely directed towards others and not towards themselves? That could be a challenge. But a human being can have a very significant emphasis on living outside, living for someone else, as opposed to for themselves. In fact, there was a time at the very beginning of creation where God created just one person, and somehow or another within that one person everything could have worked, including in that original creation perhaps there would have been a way to just reproduce that thing so that there would be others. There would be no extinction. But God said, when he conceived of the first relationship, he said, it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. Why isn't it good for man to be alone? What's missing if a person is there and is in the world by himself? Who's going to do the laundry? Sandwiches to make, foot cream to apply. So let's say we can deal with the reproduction thing. Reproduction thing would be very, very important. Yes, that could be critical. But let's say, forgetting that for a second, let's say this being would be able to somehow have within it all that it would take to be able to reproduce. It's still not. There's no goodness in man being alone. There's no goodness in a person being alone, because when you live for yourself, you live about yourself. The model, if we'll take that statement of the sages, that when a man and woman do it right, the presence of God is there. What that means is that these two people have managed, if they're doing it right, what does that mean? There's no such thing that is a relationship which is selfish between two people that manages to work. Because, hey, we're going to get it right. I need stuff, you need stuff. Two is better than one. You'll be able to cover for things that I can't do. I'll be able to cover things that you can't do. And that way, we'll all get what we need. It sounds like an arrangement, right? It's not a marriage. It doesn't work. The grounds, the basis for human relationship that works well is when a person goes into a relationship saying, I want to have here the chance, the opportunity, the beginning of caring for somebody else, of being there for somebody else. I can be there for anybody. I can be there for my friend in Sinai retreats. I can be there for my roommate. I can be there for my coworker. But that's all very, very limited, fleeting. In a marriage, two people live together in a marriage for the long term, their lives are so connected to each other, the opportunity of one person to be there for another is just completely on a different level. And in that context, what the people are doing is they're bringing out their higher nature. Shechina, the presence of Hashem is there. The presence of God is there, not in some heebie-jeebie way. Hey, look, I think I see him, right? You know how you see him? You see him in the giving, in the care, which becomes the character, the hallmark of each personality within the relationship. That's what it's about. And in that context, yes, we have something called the physical relationship which exists between men and women, which is very, very important in our, here I am. I'm a pretty religious guy, ultra-Orthodox, fanatical rabbi. So, and I know in my work, I have the privilege to deal with a lot of people, a lot of families. Sometimes they're doing better, sometimes they're not doing as well. Thank God. Thank God. A lot of times they're doing very, very, very well, very, very well. One of the great strengths of our community is family. One thing you learn in a short time is that this dimension of the relationship is very, very important. A healthy marriage, a good marriage, has a good and healthy intimate life. An intimate life which, it's not to say, okay, it's good, the guy is satisfied. No, it's that everybody's happy with each other, that they're providing for each other and they're taking care of each other in this way. This physical dimension of the relationship, is the opportunity, one of the fundamental opportunities to create a union between these two people. It's something which is done physically, spiritually, but not purely spiritually. Yes, a man and woman whose relationship is limited to their physical contact and their physical connection with each other, it will not be able to be a high-level relationship. It won't be able to be a relationship which is grounded in giving. But a relationship which was only about having great conversations, only about higher things, without connecting as well, a real connection, a real chibur, what we call it, on every level, will also be significantly challenged. But this piece, this tool, this element, which is that glue of marriage, the physical dimension which is there in the marriage, needs to be there as part of a framework of giving, of thinking about the other person. So, for example, I want to tell you some things which it says, which our tradition teaches us. The Talmud says that a man and woman, even when they're married, and in that sense, of course, permitted to each other, even if it's not, we have some kind of limitations on, there's a time of the month when a man and woman aren't supposed to be together with each other. We have family purity laws and so on and so forth. Everything's okay, everything's fine. But still, a man and woman are not supposed to be together in certain circumstances. So, for example, if they're upset with each other, they shouldn't be intimate. If the man, let's say, is thinking about somebody else, he shouldn't be with his wife. One of the great reasons not to have a TV in your bedroom. You know? If they've decided that they're going to get divorced, so you might think, okay, so, just before we go, no, they should not be together. They should not be together. There are other examples. A person's exhausted, a person's drunk. The Talmud has a list of 9 circumstances. She's not interested. Why? What's the idea? What's the common denominator between all of these things? The idea is that, like in English, we have very good euphemisms for this. But people don't want to. People want to speak about the sexual act in a more delicate way. What do they call it? What do we say in English? We call it intimacy or relations. Think about those words. They're good words. This is not Hebrew, but they're good words, because what they imply, what they're about, is that this is an opportunity for two people to really come together. To come together. And this is the way, a way, where these two people are coming together. It makes sense. It has its place in this context. As you said before, in Jewish law, we talk about a person. There's a something which is not looked upon so favorably, which is wasting of seed. Private masturbation is wasting of seed. Having relations to have children is clearly not wasting seed. How about a husband and wife being together when they can't have children for whatever reason? She's pregnant, she's older, whatever it is, wrong time of the cycles, only a certain limited amount of time when a person's able to conceive. Is that called wasting seed? It's not. Why is it not called wasting seed? Sorry? No. Without reliance on miracles, a person's pregnant already. What miracle are you looking for? The reason why it's not wasted is because the use of that piece of life is not just to produce a family of children, it's also to produce a union, a connection between the man and the woman. There's a great verse in the Torah. When the Torah speaks about the first marriage, Adam and Eve. So it's not good for man to be alone. So God breaks off a piece of man, builds it into the woman. If you remind me, at the end I'll tell you a great joke. Lots of great jokes, but we'll have one in mind. Right? He breaks off and he makes it into the woman, and then he says, and then the verse says, and from then on, from that point on, a man in the future, he will leave his father and mother to go and attach himself to his wife, and they will become as one flesh. V'hayu lebasar echad. They'll become as one flesh. What does that mean? What does that mean? And they become as one flesh. So there are two interpretations of what it means. Rashi, who you're already used to, the classic commentator, what does he say? He says, when a man and woman come together, they can conceive a child. What's that child? that child is a combination of his father and his mother, right? The father puts something in, the mother puts something in, together comes a child, right? The whole DNA sequence, everything is going to be a combination of father and mother. Okay, this is like, I always have this thing, we always have like this thing, we meet somebody, a new child, and right, all the women in the family are saying, oh, he looks like the mother. I say, looks like both. Looks like both. Got a little father, got a little mother. I don't know if it's going to be the earlobes or the eyelids or whatever it's going to be, but it's going to be both. It's going to be both. It's a very manly thing to say, right? But it's the reality. A child is fusion of father and mother. That's why, by the way, it's a very, very big challenge. Not an insurmountable challenge, but a very, very difficult challenge when a child sees their parents fighting or breaking up. They feel like the two parts of themselves are at odds with each other. Like, ouch. It's confusing. It's difficult. But, says Rashi, the two of them come together, right? If we'll diagram it, right? I think what they call Venn diagrams or something, right? We'll put a circle over here is the man, a circle over there is the woman, right? And then draw two lines, and then you have a circle on the bottom. That's the child that brings the two of them together. That's what Rashi says. Ramban Nachmanides says something else. He says, no, forget the child. Forget the child. A man leaves his father and mother, connects to his wife, and the two of them become like one. Without the child, just the two of them, a relationship is formed. They become like one flesh. Right? That could be a way of seeing the intimate act. But as Ramban says, it's more than the intimate act. Animals also come together for an intimate act. They also come together and they produce a child. But human beings don't just mate. They create a relationship, one that lasts, which isn't just there for the act or isn't just there to produce the child. There's a bond. Sound familiar? There's a bond which is created. A family is created just out of the parents. And the gift of intimacy, of that shared pleasure of intimacy, is something which is to help, not just to produce the child, which can't happen without it, but also to cement the bond between the two parties. And that can be done. Yes, as you said, there's part of the marital obligation, right? What do you say before? Part of the marital obligation is for the husband to give that pleasure to his wife. Not to impose it, to give that pleasure to his wife, and vice versa. And this act, which is, yes, it's a pleasure for every party involved, but people can go into an act which is a pleasure for every party involved and say, I want to get pleasure, you want to get pleasure, so, okay, we can figure this out together. Or a person could say, I want to give it. My role here is to give it. So I'm going to be a big martyr. I'm going to suffer. I'm not going to suffer. But my focus, my direction is, I'm going to give it. Giving is a great pleasure. Giving is a reward. Yes, Jeff?
Wait, did you just say that there's an obligation for the woman?
Obligation for the women as well.
I thought it was just for the...
Obligation for the women as well. Both ways.
No idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
But now, think of this, okay? And excuse me, I'm a straight talker, okay? So excuse me if my bluntness makes anybody uncomfortable. I ask your forgiveness in advance. But we have to be real. So there's a whole world, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and a whole world sexuality removed from relationship. Completely removed from relationship. Whether it is between a man and a woman who don't have a committed relationship to each other, whether it's between a man and a woman who don't have any form of a relationship with each other, or a man by himself. You know, the Talmud has a very interesting formulation when it describes what we referred to before, masturbation, a person stimulating themselves. You know what the Talmud calls it? It calls it a person committing adultery with themselves. Mena'ef biyad. That's the Hebrew term which the Talmud uses. Committing adultery with themselves. What does that mean? What does it mean? It's sitting right there on the fault line, on that razor edge that we raised at the beginning of this conversation, at the beginning of this discussion, which is, here you have an act which is designed to be the ultimate act of creating relationship, of giving, the ultimate act of giving. And at the same time, it can be something which is completely selfish. Okay. Now try this. So a man and a woman get married and they get together. And the man is interested in the woman. And and she's cared for. She feels like she's cared for. But then she comes to understand that actually this man also would do the same thing with somebody else on their own. How does the woman react?
With someone else, I think they'd be rather upset, but I think just people doing things with themselves is so socially acceptable now that there's a lot of women who are like, yeah, he masturbates, so what?
So you may be, in a certain sense, correct, but you would also be understanding that you would be, by doing that, say that that's sort of like setting a very, very low bar and a ceiling for what this connection is. And unfortunately, we're in a place where the bar is very, very, very low. Very low. In a world of real relationship, and I'll tell you, in a world where it's not expected, the woman goes from feeling like, you know something, I have a relationship with this person, and look how they express it to me in this loving relationship, in this caring, and instead they suddenly feel like, you know what I am? I'm a prop. Even when the person's having intimacy with me, it has nothing to do with me. They would do it without me. Maybe it's a little bit more fun with me. But they would do it without me. And in a sense, the choice we make when we approach this thing is, we're going to define what is this act in life. Is it an act of relationship? Or is it an act of self-driven lust? is it something which is within the context of relationship. Look, I'm not giving you the speech to go on a crusade about whatever or else. I'm giving you this discussion for the purpose of drawing a picture, an ideal, an achievable ideal. It's not like one doesn't have to be a big saint. When one would choose to practice limitation in these things, they're not living some life of terrible restriction. What they're doing instead is they're reserving something very special so that it will be used as something very special, as a means of forging connection, of giving, of relationship. And what it creates is something which is irreplaceable. The magic of a marriage that's good, that's strong, that's healthy, is when people get together in a relationship where they say, I have now made a central feature of my life a responsibility and an interest to care for somebody else, to make them happy, to make sure they're taken care of, to make sure they never feel like they're alone. Imagine it. Imagine an atmosphere like that. Imagine occupying a world like that. Now again, is that like some, wow, he's really taken one for the team? You understand that when you get into a dynamic like that, it's the most wonderful dynamic to be a part of. You're not like dying on the sword. First of all, for the strategic, when you take care of somebody a lot, they usually want to take care of you back a lot. They'll probably want to take care of you a lot more than if you want to get so much out of them. They're not going to be nearly as interested in giving you what you want. On any level. I'm not just talking about that level. So, strategically. But also, the truth of the matter is that there's nothing quite as satisfying as giving. And I'm not going to do this as a straw poll and ask people to raise their hands for obvious reasons. But my general impression, and it's a very strong impression, not only from personal involvement with people, but also from the literature that's out there, the non-Jewish, the general psychological, sociological literature, etc., is, and this was alluded to before by someone, is that when the person engages in this so-called lustful, pleasurable activity by themselves, when they're done, they don't usually feel too good. They don't usually feel too good. They may have gotten a little bit of a rush somewhere along the way, but when they're done, it's not what it was made for. It's not true in the context of a relationship, a real, committed relationship. It's a whole different story. Because the stuff of relationship is commitment to another person, thinking, orienting life in that person's direction. I'm going to pause for questions or comments. I know I still have to tell you a joke, but I also have to tell you another thought before we go forward. But go ahead. Any? Yeah, Mark.
So, how do you, I think a lot of people, especially those that like don't come from that, religious background, they worry about, like finding the right person, right, and staying with them, but like while you're with that person, resisting all that temptation that's out there. 'Cause there's so much temptation. We live in a city. Everywhere you look, you know what I'm saying? Everywhere you look, you open up your Instagram, you go on Facebook, because it's everywhere.
It is. It's a little crazy. It's a little crazy, yeah.
It's all in our face. Look, I'm a man. We're all men, and we react. We're visual individuals. So, I'm all for that. And look, I'm just trying to find steps to alleviate that temptation and to remain strong.
Right.
And so I don't know.
It's a great question, and it's in fact the what society has constructed around us has made it a huge challenge, and that's why you'll find many people who, in a religious context, I don't know what's happening outside, completely with this, but like in a religious context, who just won't touch that stuff. I mean, you'll see that some of the tutors here don't even have a smartphone, right? They just have a just a regular thing. Because we're all human beings. Even religious guys are human beings. They're also subject to temptation. And it's pretty challenging. But I'll tell you, the greatest formula to avoid temptation. The greatest formula to avoid temptation. What's that?
Close your eyes.
No. I didn't hear what you said. What? Do I want to hear what you said? Okay. I'll tell you the greatest formula to avoid temptation, and it's not closing your eyes, and it's not putting up a wall, because eyes have to open at times. There are always cracks in walls. I think there's one solution. And the solution is satisfaction. What it means is, what I mean by that is, and this is, at some point, if you like, we could read the Rambam. Maimonides writes about this, but it's something which is again seen just generally in life, and it's just completely logical. When a person has a void in their life, it gets filled with all kinds of stuff. Addiction is there to fill a void. All kinds of stuff that we go after that isn't so good for us is because we're not filled with stuff. A couple of the guys here spend the year in a yeshiva in Waterbury, Connecticut, right? So, right, I remember the way I heard him once talk about it. One of the rabbis here is great. He says, so he has a bunch of kids who are really dealing with very, very human struggles on all levels. And he says, our goal is, one thing, we're here to get people so motivated about what they're doing in life, they don't have time for that. A married person should be aiming to have a relationship with such love and satisfaction in giving. There's no room for that. There's no taste for that. And it's achievable. It might sound like it's like, whoa, where is it? But in a world of lowered bars, it's completely unfathomable. You need to pull yourself out of the world of lowered bars. The world of lowered bars, when it comes to relationships, is a disaster. Okay, I sometimes meet up with clergymen of other faiths. Right? However it happens. Somebody's got to do something for those jokes about the rabbi, the priest, and the imam going into a bar. Right? You know what they ask me all the time? You know what the question is? do you guys have those families? How do you have those families? How do you have it? People are like so invested in families. They have married, like people are getting married. They're getting married at a young age. They're building families. The families are lasting. They're growing children. They're focused around their families. How do you do that? Okay, and this is not just a question from Baltimore, rat-infested inner city, preachers who nobody knows. The woman has 3 kids from 3 different people at 20. It's sad. I'm saying, but that's normal. That's unfortunately that's a reality. I'm talking about even but beyond that. It's a huge thing, because and we have our struggles too. It's not a perfect world. The Orthodox Jewish world of families also struggles because of all the stuff that's going on around. It filters in and it gets there, but we're still doing pretty well. Pretty well. The bar doesn't have to be low. It doesn't have to be low. When people will think about real relationship, there's such a thing as having a life built on giving, caring for somebody else, and having the fulfillment of that. It leaves very little space. It leaves very little space.
Can I follow up with that? one
Please.
thing? I saw this link on Torah Anytime, and I think the rabbi's name was, I think it was Zachariah Feldman or something. I'm not sure if that was his name, but it was just like a quick tidbit. It was like a 1-minute thing, and he said that, I just want to get your thoughts.
Zachariah Wallerstein, by any chance?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
With the glasses. Well,
I'll try not to be offended.
So he said that actually, when you look at women, especially non-Jewish women, that you're looking at them simultaneously causes you to become, in a sense, their slave, or you're giving their power to them. And it's like it transfers in a Kabbalistic manner into the other world or something, that you're essentially enslaving yourself to another individual when you look at them. And I just wanted to I found that pretty fascinating, and I was just wondering, I think I butchered what he said, but it's
No, I think. Look, I can't speak to the Kabbalistic stuff. It's not so much my area. But the idea that a person finds themselves captured by something and finds themselves just. That's exactly where no human being wants to be. A human being wants to be choosing to engage properly. And when we are caught up in something, when we're just, it's already, that spells negative. Yes, it spells control from something else. What the Kabbalistic ideas of that are, I don't know. But the core of the idea, yes. Okay. So I think it's the beginning of it. Maybe we'll have another chance to talk, and to talk about relationships. We can talk about how, in truth, the beginning of it is people caring for each other, but it also has to have something which is higher than that. At that Sheva Brachas, at the wedding ceremony or during the week after, there's a blessing which is made at the beginning. The first blessing, formal blessing which is made about the wedding is, blessed are you, Hashem our God, King of the universe, who created everything for His honor, who created everything for this great purpose. The statement of that is that families that come together, yes, husband and wife in their relationship are there to take care of each other, but they're also there to build something. They're there to build something for a shared vision and a shared purpose. To give honor to God, to give honor to the godly values, to build something for Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, for Hashem, our God, the God of the Jewish people, King of the universe. And that part of the mix, I don't know really how to theorize marriage completely without it. Part of it is building a home, a big part is building that home of togetherness, of care for each other, which is a universal value. And then there is the piece which plays such a significant role of building together a Jewish home. Building together a Jewish home with that direction of some greater and higher purpose. I'm leaving that with you as a parting thought, but because the hour is late, we'll have to, maybe God willing, develop it a little bit more, along with some other aspects in the future. But I promised you the joke. So what happened was, God came to man and he says, it's not good for you to be alone. So he says, okay, I hear, like, what do you have in mind? He says, I think you should have a partner who's going to share your life, share your dreams, care for you as much as you care for yourself. You'll live together forever in eternal, wonderful bliss. And man said, that sounds amazing. Sounds amazing, wonderful. He says, so what do I have to do? So he says, you have to give me one of your arms, one of your legs, one of your eyes, and one of your ears. Man said, that sounds like a lot. What can you give me for a rib?